Welcome to the Home Team Sacramento podcast. I'm Josh Takimoto, and today we actually have a guest that lived in our home team here in Sacramento for a little while. Technically not living, not part of the home team right now, but as we've said before, sometimes we like to bring in just brilliant minds to come on this podcast to share their knowledge with our home team. So that's what we're doing today. We've got Conor Manning. What's up, man?
Yeah. How's it going, man? Yeah,
Good.
yeah. I love it. Thank you for just pumping me up. Uh,
Absolutely. I wouldn't say
you
if it
know,
wasn't true. I
yeah.
would not say it.
It sounds a lot like I had a coach in high school that used to say like he would always talk really positively about the other team, and then later he would tell you that he'd like to pump up their balls before he smashed them.
I like that.
So
Well,
I hope I don't get crushed soon, but I feel pumped up. So thanks.
well, good. I like that. We could probably I like that analogy. That's pretty good. I had a coach that said something similar, a little bit different. But when I was playing baseball, he would always say, "You want to blow up the balloon on the other team,"
Yeah,
specifically talking about the pitcher, right? So, you're not talking necessarily talking trash to them, but you're cheering on your teammates, being loud, saying certain things, and then I did with the idea of like them getting so much in their head where finally the balloon
yeah,
pops, right?
yeah,
Kind of the
yeah.
same thing. It's a
Just
nice way
like
of saying you
adding
want to,
pressure.
yeah, it's a nice way of saying you want to screw with your opponent, right? Like you're really trying
Yeah,
to mess with them.
for
So
sure.
I'm of the same mentality, man. So that being said, I don't plan on stepping on anything or crushing you,
Perfect.
just pumping you
Great.
up. And then,
Great.
that's all we got. So, uh,
Yeah.
man, I appreciate you coming on this podcast. Usually I was just telling you, normally we bring someone on the podcast and we get into their backstory and we just learn more about them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I have you on for a very specific reason that we talked about a little bit earlier. But before we jump into that and we explain that a little bit, tell us a little bit about your sports background. I don't know if you've coached at all. I know you're an athlete. I
Yeah.
know that for sure. But take us through
Right.
your sports and coaching background.
Yeah. So I mean, I played sports growing up. Primarily football was my jam. Played through high school, and then obviously got you hit that magical age where it's like if you don't really go to college to play sports, you're left with like rec leagues and stuff like that. So had played in stuff like that.
What
Actually
position?
crazy in football, kind
Yeah.
of all over the place.
Okay.
Just kind of depended. My senior year of high school, I was actually at a small Christian school.
Okay.
And I remember walking in. This is a fun coach story. I remember walking in and we did like the weigh in. I wasn't a whole lot shorter than I was now, but probably a solid like 20 some pounds lighter,
Okay. Sure.
um, 100, I think I weighed in like 176 pounds or something like that. And I remember in really, really less delicate terms, I was told I wasn't allowed to poop for a week because I needed to add weight.
Yeah.
Because at this particular small Christian school, being a guy that was like 6'1", I was considered big. So like
Right.
I came in at 6'1" and 176 pounds, having played like defensive back, running back, had gotten a little bit into like linebacker stuff like that. I came in and they were like, "Hey, we need you to play on a line."
Oh, geez.
So they wanted me to like all of a sudden be really heavy. And ultimately that's what I ended up doing my senior year, which wasn't really my preference, but I did get to hit people every play, which I liked that part. So,
There you go.
um, but for a while I was playing both ways, offensive and defensive line, because a guy got hurt early on. And so I had no idea what I was doing on the offensive side. It was just like, hey, just block somebody. I was like, all right, cool, got
Just
it.
get in their way.
Just get in their way, push people around, which worked out. So I did that, and I actually got into coaching at Capital
Okay.
in Sacramento. So um, I was working with defensive backs and wide receivers on the JV team, on the JV football team, um, for a stretch there for 3 years, which was a ton of fun. To do that. And then I've coached like my kids' sports and stuff like that, that sort
Right.
of a deal, which is like it's like a whole nother animal, but I'm highly competitive. So more than once I've had to be like reined in on the sideline, like, hey, it's not really, you don't need to do that, um uh but it just is what it is. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
can I tell like I'll tell you another funny story. So I'm
Please.
coaching flag football. This might totally
Okay.
deviate from my whole topic today, but that's okay.
That's all right.
I'm coaching flag football, right? And this other dad was like, "Hey, I can help out." I was like, "Great." So I took the kids on offense. He took the kids on defense. And this is like, how old were they? Probably, third grade flag football, something, you know what I mean? Um, and so we're trying to work this whole thing out. And offensively, like we're doing okay, but our defense is just like terrible. And the kids are like way too scared about, like, because there was actually blocking involved,
Gotcha. A little contact there.
you did need to be a little bit aggressive,
Yeah.
and there's way too much hesitancy about it. Um, and I remember like we lost like 3 games in a row, and I was just like up here, like I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And I remember at halftime of this one game, we sat the kids down, and I was like, "Hey, coach, like I got this." And I sat and I was like, "Listen to me. If one of the kids on the other team doesn't go crying to their mother about how hard they got hit in this next half, we are not playing the rest of the season. Like if you don't make a kid cry today, you're not doing your job. You understand me? Do we
Well,
got it? Get it together and let's go." I'm telling you, we didn't lose another game though.
I bet.
Like we won that game, and every other game thereafter, it was like they just needed permission to, like, oh, like we can be violent in the sport. Yes, you can. Like
Preferred. Yeah.
that's what we're after right now. Like,
Right. Well, well,
but I
plus
know
when
that the other dad was looking at me and goes, "Oh, oh,
I've been doing this wrong the whole time. And yeah, and it's like, hey, when you have that on the sidelines waiting for you after every play, the kid on the other team's not that scary, right?
no, not even a little bit."
Like I don't want to get in trouble by coach. We can't,
Yeah,
we can't,
coach, he's gonna
we
lose
got to
it.
knock someone out right now. I
Oopsie.
like that. That's funny. What was, and
Yeah.
I'm sure their reaction was like, what is going on right now? Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Well, they got kind of pumped because I was like, "Listen to me, like, how many of you have like an older brother or sister?" And they're like, "Oh, I do, whatever. Little brother, sister. Okay, I do." It's like, you ever have those moments where you wish you could just take them out? And they're like, "Yeah." It's like this is your opportunity, right? Like this is your opportunity to envision them on the other side and just go like light them up. Okay.
it's like the water
Um.
boy.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Just yeah, there's like a bunch of siblings all over the field. Like
Oh yeah,
I'm
for
gonna light
sure.
this
Just
guy up.
beep.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's exactly what it was like. Oh my goodness. But it was super fun. It was super fun to see him just kind of get it and have it click. And
that's the best part
I
of
don't know.
coaching, right? Like that's what every
Oh, for
coach that's come on
sure.
this show is like. A coach or trainer, they say they live for the moments when that light bulb goes on, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I understand this technique now, or I understand this
Yep,
concept of this the play that we're running. They say it's the best thing ever. That's why you do the
for sure.
coaching, is to help
Right.
them learn and get it. So it makes
Right.
sense. And hey, good for
Right.
you too, man. Going from the high school level to the youth level. I don't know if people realize how difficult. I mean, if you've done it, you realize how difficult it is
Oh
because the
yeah.
intensity level is so much different. But
Oh yeah.
inside, you're still competitive. Like I've seen your
Right.
Instagram posts, like when you and your family play like Monopoly, for example. I know
Hmm.
you're not cutting those kids any slack. You're trying to crush your
No,
kids. You know what I mean? It's just
exactly.
in you. So
How else are they going to learn? You
exactly.
know,
They gotta learn. They
got to
gotta
learn.
learn. Yeah.
We were at a county fair the other day, and they were like, "Hey, let's race through like the little mirror maze thing." I was like, "Okay, sure."
Yeah.
I let them all start ahead of me and just smoked them and turned around. I think I put it on Instagram. I recorded the whole thing, me beating them through
Yeah.
this mirror maze, and it was just like, got up. I was like, "Oh, like who won? Who won, kid?" You
Yeah. Just
know?
look at your watch, like it's about time. I've been
Yeah,
waiting here
about
for a
time you
while.
guys got here.
Yeah. I love it. Hey, but those are good life lessons. They're fun stories, but they're also good life lessons, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
it's, I
yeah.
mean, we could talk about the whole participation trophy thing, but that's like a whole episode.
Oh,
We're
it's a
not
whole
going to do
nother
that
thing.
today. But so that's where your coaching
Yep.
has stopped recently, right? Like you're doing the youth level thing. Are you still coaching right now, or
My no, I coached last summer. I coached my 8-year-old, him in football. This
contact
next
or still
level,
flag?
no, it's still flag.
Okay,
So this next level up, like this Saturday, is it this Saturday? It's in like a week or 2 weeks from now. He actually goes and picks up his pads for this next season to get into like full contact
that's awesome.
football, which would be really fun. I It's one of those deals where like I put my name down that I could potentially help out with coaching. I haven't heard anything from anybody, so I don't know if that's something that'll come up this year. Um, but there's a really good group of guys that were involved in like the flag football coaching that I know we're progressing up, and it gets into like a different space. We're in a smaller town, and it's very much this like feeder system where it's like the kids at this level are already learning like the play concepts that would
Right.
be used at the high school level. So it's just kind of all feeds together, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I don't really know if they have like preset coaching steps. I really just don't totally know how it works. Like at the
Right.
flag level, they're like, please, dear God, will anybody come and try to
Just a
corral
warm
these
body.
children
Yeah.
and stop them from like eating grass or,
Picking their
pulling
nose.
flags off each other,
Yeah.
picking their nose. Um, yeah, at the youth level, it's a totally different deal. I used to set a timer on my phone where every like 6.5 to 7 minutes we would change the activity we were doing because their like attention span isn't long enough to do anything for longer than that. So it was
Right.
just like the timer would go off and oh, here we go. Here's the next thing, kids. Like we're doing another thing.
That's smart. That's smart.
Um, you just can't get them. Like if you can run a play, it's like a miracle, you know.
Right.
But it's fun. It is super fun. And like you said, I think that's the crux of even where what as far as what you've laid out for me of what we want to talk about today. The whole point of coaching is to help people realize like untapped potential,
Right.
right? And
100%.
so it's when you see those wheels clicking and turning and what you see as possible within somebody when that starts to like come to the surface, that is the reason why you do it.
Absolutely. 100%.
So
100%.
um but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. And it's cool that and I'm really interested to, jump into this topic that we're going to be talking about tonight because you have coached at different levels, you've competed at different levels, and then also beyond sports, you yourself are. I know you do the health coaching thing, but then also I know you as a mentor to a lot of people throughout the years too, and people look at you as a leader. So your insight on this specific topic is really interesting to me, and why you're on the show. And a little while ago, I can't remember how long ago it was, on Instagram, you've been doing these like Wisdom Wednesday posts, which are awesome. I love them. And one of the things you were talking about was criticism versus feedback, and then the difference
Mhm.
between the two. And something we've talked about on this podcast before is, sometimes, especially in this current culture, uh, sometimes like if you're too harsh, it comes off,
Mhm.
like you're being mean or you're just being critical. And it's that you kind of lose this idea of, hey, there is such thing as positive criticism. That doesn't mean you let someone get away with things. There's correction,
Right.
but you do it in a way that's going to be beneficial, and it's going to help them move forward, not, so negative where they're going to be stuck in a spot. And so I
Yeah,
think sometimes in this current climate, that gets lost a little bit. And I think
for
there's
sure.
there's a lot of nuance to it. But um, just let me hear some of your insight on why you decided to post that and what kind of sparked that, and just your thoughts, again, criticism versus feedback, and why that's so important to understand the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So Um, what sparked that at that particular moment? I honestly don't know that I could tell you exactly what it was, but what happens with those posts in general is just something happens in my life or I have an encounter or a moment, and then something gets stuck in my head and I think about it for a period of time. Like, what's the difference between these two things, or why did this happen the way that it happened? Um, what I think about a lot is like when it comes to criticism versus feedback, and even in the way that I think I presented the thought, it's like it can come down to a little bit to semantics. So, in the way that I was describing criticism, I meant like a statement that is like static, fixed reality about someone, saying you are this, or you can't do, or you'll never be, something that is only negative, and doesn't provide any opportunity for that potential realization that we're talking about when it comes to coaching, right? Versus feedback, in my mind, is something that's more oriented around, here's this thing that's not what it could be, right? Like you didn't perform this to this level, or you didn't do what you should have done, but here's what you could have done better, is more feedback oriented, right?
Right.
And the reality of it is that I don't know how on earth you would coach anybody at anything, or really have any sort of healthy relationship in your life, period, without having space and opportunity to give feedback and to, in a lot of ways, be critical. Because like you said, criticism can be a good thing, and it's actually really necessary. Like
Right.
if like I think about it for like parents. Like if you're a parent and you took your kid to some performance coach, and you're paying this person hundreds of dollars to help your child develop in this athletic space, and they never told their kid what they were doing wrong, how would you feel? You'd feel like you wasted your money, right? It'd be a waste of time and money. If all you're going to do is affirm who they already are, that is a waste of time and money. You don't bring them there so they can stay the same. You bring them to get better. And the only way to get better at anything, life, sports, work, um, any space, the only way to get better is to acknowledge what the shortcomings are and then formulate some plan to address those shortcomings and then implement that plan to make it better. That's the only way that it really works.
Right.
And so, criticism in that space is dangerous, I think, because if you get into the space where you say you are not, or you can't, or you won't, what that does is it removes the hope of that future potential realization, and it removes all motivation, right? Theoretically, it removes all motivation. Now, I happen to be somebody who responds in a very intense way to things like that. If you tell me I can't do it, I'm going to give you a middle finger and I'm going to give it everything I got to
Yeah.
shove it in your face. So,
Right.
but that also comes from a pretty unhealthy place in my life. That doesn't come from I'm satisfied in myself and I feel good about who I am. It's more okay, you tell me I can't, well, I'm going to prove you wrong, kind of a deal.
Sure.
A much healthier space is coming in and saying, hey, you didn't do this right. And it just, I mean, sometimes in the coaching world, this stuff just comes out, right? Again, just thinking about just weird moments where you don't even know what to do with what the person is saying to you.
Right.
I remember I had this coach that used to say the weirdest stuff in football. One time he yelled at us that we looked like a bunch of parrot heads at a Jimmy Buffett concert. uh like what do you do with that?
All right.
He was
Yeah.
clearly angry and he meant it as an insult.
Sure.
One, I don't think any of us knew who Jimmy Buffett was.
The deep
Definitely had no
reference.
idea
Yeah.
what a parrot head. I don't know what a parrot head meant at the
Yeah.
time, and what it had to do with what we were doing in that moment, I don't know. I think he told us we looked like a can of spilled blueberries, a cow pissing on a flat rock. You know what I mean? What does
Sure.
someone do with that? I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
even know where you're going for, right?
Right.
But when a coach comes along and says, hey, you got beat on that play because you put your feet here instead of there. And if you had just shifted your feet and changed your base, you could have executed that at this level, right?
Yeah.
Rep again, do it right, right?
Right.
Like that's feedback. That gives me something tangible, hey, you didn't do this well, and not doing it well produce this outcome. And because I know you want this outcome, make this adjustment, execute it again, and then reap the reward of it, right? And then you have to repeat those things over and over again, develop that mind muscle connection so that you don't have to think about it anymore.
Right.
But um, that's where that thought comes from. That's kind of like the baseline of it, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thought, especially when it comes to sports, because there's a lot of different elements to it, right? Like, obviously a coach's job is to provide feedback. On the flip
Yeah,
side, the athlete, and it's tough because our primary audience is the high school level, high school athletes, high school coaches. At that age, and you've mentored high school students, specifically guys, sometimes it's challenging to get through to them at that age because there's a lot of stuff
yeah,
going on, and to help them connect the dots can be a challenge sometimes. So even if you are providing feedback to them that you
yeah,
you know is going to help them in their life and on the field, they're also, on the flip side, they have to be able to receive it, right? Like they have to be
right,
able to receive it. And when you have sports and when ego's involved and you're very prideful about your abilities and the challenges that are presented in front of you, I feel like even those things can be a barrier to hearing the coach's feedback, right? Like you hear, hey, I've
right,
been a stud athlete my whole life, and then you get to a certain level, it's like, okay, now I'm not a big fish in a small pond. I'm the same size fish as everybody else in this pond. And then you're not used to that. So when you get the feedback that you're not used to, all of a
right,
sudden it's like, wait a minute, like this is this is not what I'm used to, and this doesn't feel great.
right,
And I think the best athletes are the ones who, like you said, are like, okay, yeah, I have weaknesses, like I want to address all of them because I'm gonna
right,
be better than everybody else. And if you're not willing to listen, I will, because I know this is what I need and it's going to make me
right.
better. And so, it's interesting when
Yeah.
you have there's a lot of moving pieces to it. So it's not just saying, "Hey,
Right.
here's some feedback. Oh, great, thanks, coach." Like there's a lot of connections, a lot of human relationship and dynamics that are a
Right.
part there. I think.
For sure. It like immediately makes me think about this experience when I was coaching, high school JV receivers, right? So the playbook has gotten more complicated than what they've previously experienced.
Right.
All of a sudden, there's more routes in a route tree. The calls are more complicated. Um, Kid that's a really good athlete, really fast, right? Generally speaking, like you said, has been able just to outrun everybody his whole life, coming up through Pop Warner and middle school football and all that kind of stuff. All of a sudden, we're like in lines and we're running routes, right? And we're practicing getting to the line, hearing a route called, and then running it, right? You have to run the right route for your quarterback, and he keeps missing. And then so then the conversation ensues as a coach. Well, hey, like, have you spent time going over this? Well, no, I haven't. Why haven't you? Well, I just didn't. In essence, he wasn't saying it, but basically saying he just didn't care that much, right? Wasn't super interested in it. Hey, listen, like, I know what you're physically capable of, but we'll never be able to utilize what you're physically capable of until your brain gets in the game. And so what you're going to do for the rest of this practice, you're going to sit on the sideline, you're going to watch everybody else run routes as they're called out, and you're going to mentally map what you're supposed to be doing when you hear this call. Well, I don't want
Mm.
to do that. I didn't ask if you wanted to do it. I'm your coach and I'm telling you what you're going to do. So you're going to go over there and sit down and do it. He threw a fit, took off his pads and walked into the locker room, right?
Yeah.
And I did not go chase him down. Maybe I would have gone and found him later, but he went inside for maybe 10 minutes and then came back out 10 minutes later and sat down on the sideline and just started listening. I didn't go over and confront him about going to the locker room. Like, he figured it out while he was in there,
Yeah.
right? That I want to be on the team. I'm not going to quit over this. He showed up. And in the end, like over time in the season, he really ended up becoming a really big asset and
Wow.
a great contributor to the team. But like, it's like both ends of that spectrum, right? If you leave it unaddressed, you're not helping him because you're like encouraging immaturity in his life, lack of responsibility. He's not being a good teammate. He's going to end up hurting the work and effort that everybody else is putting in. And he's not really developing to his full potential.
Right.
Now you have to go through like the rough stretch of
Right.
confronting the ego and being like, bro, you're 14 years old. Okay. Like, get over yourself.
Right.
You're not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Like,
Hey, calm it. You just now have some facial hair. Calm down, bro.
yeah, like
Yeah.
in your mind,
Yeah.
you're like Jerry Rice or something, but
Sure.
I promise you, you're, you're whatever, you're 14. So just
Right.
like get it together. And it ended up being a really great thing. But like, I think part of what separates it, and this is like where my mind starts to go too, is like coaching from a position of anger or frustration is dangerous. Any type of like life confrontation can be dangerous if you're coming at it from a position of I'm entitled to your obedience and you're not doing what I'm telling you to do, so I'm going to respond with anger, right?
Yeah.
That is not helpful. Okay, that is not setting the table for the other person to respond well, to like engage with you and then produce this outcome you're after. But if I'm going to you in a really calm manner because I care about you and I see the potential in you and I'm speaking to the potential saying, hey, you could be this if you'll do this, right?
Right.
And then leave it in their court. Well, now this particular kid had the opportunity to throw a fit, weigh out his ego versus what he wanted, which was to be part of the team and part of the effort and wanted to be able to catch balls and be on the offense. I mean, some of it is ego, right? Where it's like he wants to be able to wear his jersey on Friday to school and people know that he's on the team and he wants to do all those things, right?
Right.
Social motivation, internal motivation. So it creates this opportunity for him to go in and like weigh that out. What do I really want? Who do I really want to be? And then humble himself and come and sit down,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then progressively put in the work because a lot of that stuff is it just takes time. It is that repetition thing. So it wasn't like he was going to watch one session of people running routes and like
Right.
instantly get it. So, the next day at practice, I didn't make him sit and watch again. But we went over some of the routes and he seemed to have a better concept of it. And so it's like, okay, now you need to pay attention. Each one of these, we're gonna work on it and develop the skill. Totally different attitude though, right? Like you
Right.
said, coming in coachable
Right.
and interested in maximizing potential.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting too because again, we're talking about feedback. So in your
Mm-hmm.
situation with this athlete, you're providing feedback, but you said you didn't go chase this athlete. Your job is not to like force feed him this information and then make him do it. Like the bottom. I've said this so many times. You can't go make him like you can't do the lifts for him in the weight room. You can't do the reps on the
Nope.
field. You can't play the game for
Uh-huh.
him. You can't make him do the schoolwork that's going to keep him eligible to be able to play on Friday nights. Like you can't
Right.
do any of that. So your job as a coach is to give the feedback. And then at that
Right.
point, they have to be willing to either accept it and use it and implement it into their life. Or unfortunately, sometimes they're just, I mean, I've known guys that I played with back in the day, and I've heard stories where when they take the pads off that night, that day, when they get that feedback from the coach, that's it. Like they don't come back.
Right.
I mean, that really is
Yeah.
the end of it. They take the pads off and you never see them again because they're just like, I can't do this. I can't take this type of criticism, right? Or feedback.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
it's all a learning process. But at the end of the day, that's what makes coaching so frustrating sometimes, right? Is like you have all of this
Yeah.
knowledge and you try to give this feedback that's going to help their life. But at the end of the day, you just got to let them do what they do with it and just hope that what you're saying hits them, you know?
Yeah. For sure. And I think sometimes that is a function of like the unhealthy coaching side of it. Like I do think that as a coach, you could take the wind out of a kid's sails
100%.
and just suck the life out of the sport for them, and then
Hmm.
they're gonna tap out and quit and never maximize that potential. And some of that responsibility lies on a coach. Sometimes, sometimes it's the person,
Right.
right? It's that person, and maybe that stems from like unhealthy parenting at home. They've never been forced to take responsibility for their actions anywhere else, and this is a new experience and they don't know what to do with it. Sometimes it's like insecurity. Sometimes who knows what, right? I mean, there could be 1,000 different reasons why
Right.
they just aren't ready to take whatever you're feeding, give them back. But if I promise you the outcome and the probability of a kid staying in the game and sticking with it, giving them that type of like, hey, this is what I see in you and this is what I know you're capable of, and I see that you're not living up to that. Here's the things you need to do to be able to live up to that potential and really draw the potential out. Way higher probability they're sticking around than
Right.
like, hey, you can't spill blueberries, like
Right.
whatever that means. Like,
Right.
like what a weird statement to make to somebody. But telling somebody like you're no good or you suck or you're terrible, you're awful, what's wrong with you? Why did you miss that? Why can't you get this right? Da 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 da. All these things, because all those things sound static, right? Like, why can't you get it right? Even sounds like, well, I can't get it right. I am
Right.
incapable of doing this thing the correct way. And if that's the case, I do not know why I'm trying to do it because
Right.
I can't do it.
Right.
Right. Which is super screwed up and the opposite of the whole point of coaching. I do think at times there are people that get into coaching for like the title or appearance. And I don't know that their heart or desire in it really is for the maximum potential of the players or the people that they're working with.
Which
Um,
I've mentioned that before. Sorry not to cut you off, but like I've mentioned that before.
yeah,
And if you really sit down and think about that concept, right? Especially when you're looking at the youth
yeah,
level or the high school level, you as a grown man or woman are willing to dedicate all this time to hang out around high school
yeah,
kids just to win a pennant, right? A banner that
yeah.
you can hang in the gym. Like it's a bizarre concept. Like why would you
Super
put all
bizarre.
why would you put all this time and effort in if there's not a greater life
Right.
impact that can happen? It's
Yeah,
like I like, what I mean? It's like you have kids, you have a job, you have a
yeah.
busy life. Like I do too. I can't imagine dedicating that much time to simply win a trophy to say, hey, look at I coached a bunch of high school kids and we won a trophy. Like it's a very bizarre
Oh, yeah.
concept when you really think about it.
It's super weird. It's super weird because I think it's that. I think there's some type of like their ego involved, right?
Right.
Or sometimes it's like this is another thing that screws with my head a little bit sometimes around coaches of like youth and kids and all that kind of stuff. It's like, so hey, guy, like, or woman, could be either one, but like, what's in my head right now is this guy in particular. It's like,
You want to say his name?
no,
No, I'm just kidding.
like you didn't make it past high school athletics,
Right.
and now you're coaching like a U10 baseball team, right? Not even the coach, but a coach with the group that's coaching. And you are yelling at these kids from this position of like entitlement that makes it seem like you won the World Series or something, like you are the ultimate authority
Yeah.
on exactly how this should work.
Yeah.
And you are losing your mind. Like literally one time walking past, you go to those places like a baseball complex and there's like 4 or 5
Yeah.
baseball diamonds in
Yeah.
like a whatever, and you're walking by. And I'm walking by, and this kid, I mean, he made an effort. I'm watching as I'm walking. He made an effort and missed a fly ball. And this guy came up off the bench and is reaming this kid out from the dugout about how he missed this ball. Just, I mean,
Hmm.
expletives, dropping the F bomb at this kid. And these are like 10-year-olds playing baseball. You know what I mean? And I'm walking by and I stopped and I just looked around because I was like waiting. I was waiting for a parent to stand up or something. And
Yeah.
like, because I'm telling you right now, you yell at my kid like that, I'm going to come in the dugout
Sure.
and I'm not going to talk to you about it.
Yeah. It's
Like,
gonna be a different kind
it'd
of conversation.
be
Yeah.
very different because I can tell you this, my kid's going to know that I'm going to defend them
Yeah.
more than I'm going to worry about how I make this grown man feel.
Sure.
Like,
Right.
the game is on now. I was just, like, my mind was blown. I was looking around like, what is this? Like, how does this even work? And I can't believe nobody's it. And then it like clicked. Very possible that's his kid. I don't know for sure. I couldn't really see that far, but very possible it's his kid. And if that's the way that that works, that's messed up. Anyway, that's a tangent, but that's somebody who's
Yeah.
in coaching, and just by like the methodology or the way you would speak to a child
Hmm.
lets me know that your motivation is very screwed up. Like you are not prioritizing the potential in that kid out there over your ego, right?
Yeah.
Your own expectations. You're just losing your crap because you're still a kid, probably a U10 kid on the inside that feels inadequate, and so you're like manifesting this insecurity into other kids' lives in the
Right.
worst way, right?
Right.
And it
Well,
just
I mean,
is
yeah.
jacked.
Well, I mean, and I've said this before too. At that point, you're not looking at these people that you're coaching, these kids that you're coaching as human beings. You're looking at them as pawns. Like you're moving them on this fake chessboard, and it's like whatever it takes to get you in the winning position, you will do. Whatever it takes, you will say, and you have no concept or clue about what you're doing to that kid's psyche. And to your point earlier, we don't know, right? As people, when we interact with other people, with other kids, you don't know what their life is like. You don't know what their life is like
No.
off the field always. I mean, hopefully you do as a coach. If you're an invested coach,
Yeah.
hopefully you have an idea, but we don't know what's going on with a kid. And so if you are a coach with this negative mentality that, just like you said, just laying into kids all the time with no concern about what's going on in their mind and their heart, you don't know what that home life's like. And if they have a horrible home life where they're getting that at home, well, now they
Right.
come to the field where they're hoping that can be a positive outlet. Well, no, it's not, because the coach is basically
Right.
just a second version of what they're already getting at home. When
Right.
you have an opportunity to really impact that person's life and kind of send their life in a different direction, you're just
Right.
compounding the problem by adding on to that negativity that they're already feeling. And it's,
Right.
and we always say, like, we tend on this podcast, we always talk about like the power of coaching and how you can impact a kid's life, not just on the field. They may never play another down of football in their life.
Right.
They may never play another down for your team at the high school level. They may be a bench warmer, but the concepts that you're teaching are things that they can carry through life with them. The boardroom, classroom, their
Right.
family room, all these different areas of life. Those are concepts that will benefit their life. And on the
Right.
flip side, a coach can have just as much of a negative impact on them if
Right.
they don't like really respect and understand the responsibility that they've been
For
given. So
sure.
or been given. So it's, I mean, it's incredibly frustrating when you see a coach like that, because they have no clue what they're doing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or they don't
Right.
care, which is worse.
Which is crazy because like if you look at any coach at any level that I've ever thought like, oh man, like that person seems like they're a really good coach. What you hear them talk about is like, yes, they're teaching a specific skill in a sport or space, but ultimately what they're most interested in is a human being. You
Yeah.
know, I'm interested in the person. And I know that if I help that person, just in general, help them cultivate that potential inside them, I'm going to get the best out of them on the field, right? Because nobody plays their best when they are have a bunch of other things happening in life that are negative, like they can't focus, they can't think about home life, school life, friendships and relationships. All those things get kind of muddied, and it affects performance. So when you're able to help people realize, like, hey, yes, what we're learning right now is like proper technique in a specific sport, but proper technique in the classroom with these relationships relating to your parents, all these other things are going to create smoothness in all these other areas, like you said, that then does translate into work life.
Right.
Right? Even team function. How do you prioritize others above yourself? Right? All those sorts of like really, really cool lessons you learn playing sports, but you only really learn them if like the coaching comes together to say, hey, here's the objective. Because that's the other side of that, right? Where it's like part of your goal is to mine the potential of your individual players, but it's
Right.
also the collective potential of a team.
Right.
And you
Yeah.
have to cast some vision in that, right? I
Hmm.
think vision casting is part of appropriate feedback, is saying, here's what's potential. Like I always think of like vision as something that is not, but could be, right?
Right.
It's out there, right? Here's the vision. Here's the possibilities. So you cast some vision on the personal level and on the team level, and you say, hey, here's what we're driving towards. Here's what it's going to take, right? Collectively, every member of this team needs to do this, and this in order for us to get there.
Right.
You as an individual, in order for you to get to your full potential and add full value to the team, you need to do this, and this that's specific to you. Then you can kind of drill that down, right, into roles, specific players, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
Um,
That's really good. I like that. I like the idea of the vision casting and how much that would, I guess, aid a coach in giving feedback. Because like, if you don't know where you're going, like how could I take the feedback that seriously? Right? It's like we'll just do
right,
this. Like, why? Like why are we doing this? Like why is this beneficial? And if you don't cast that vision, yeah, it would make giving feedback and probably for the athlete receiving feedback really difficult, and it's probably not going to be as optimal as it could be. Whereas, like you said, if you cast that vision initially and you create that culture, I think that's why like sports teams cultures are so important. That's why you mentioned the feeder school, right? We have the same thing out here in Sacramento. There's a lot of these high school teams that have the junior programs, and then they run the same system. And then by the time you get to the high school level, the varsity level, they know it's ingrained in who they are.
right,
And the best programs, there's a certain like aura or culture that they create, right? Where
right,
it's like, okay, if you wear this uniform and you play for this school, there's a certain standard
right,
of excellence that we expect. So, all that stuff I think feeds into the feedback, right? 'Cause it's not like
right,
some Joe Schmo coach is like your record is 0-10 every year. Like, what
right,
is this feedback? But if you know a culture that is like, oh, you guys are undefeated every year and you crush teams, I'm going to be
right.
more willing to accept that feedback. And not that it's just about performance, but you know, the culture, overall culture of how you run a team really, really feeds into that feedback, I think.
Oh, for sure,
Yeah,
for sure. And you think about that in terms. I mean, you can apply that almost universally,
sure.
right? Like, um, if I tell my kids to do chores, they ask me why. You know what I mean? Why are we doing this? Like if I don't connect why are we vacuuming? Why are we putting things away? Why are we cleaning the bathroom? You know what I mean? Nobody wants to do any of those things, but like, why do we do it? Well, here's why we do it. Um, right. And cast that as a bigger vision than you're saving dad a headache. But we have things, we have objects that we care about. We want those objects to last a long time. This is a reflection of the value we place on the home that we live in,
Right.
and what we believe to be valuable about ourselves and what we're worth. And so, because of those things, we take our time to clean, put things away, so on and so forth. Right. That's probably a terrible example for teenager athletes because they're like, that sounds awful. Like, I still don't want to clean. It doesn't make me want to clean, but it attaches a reason to it. It's the
Sure.
same thing to me as
Sure.
like being on a football field or baseball diamond or whatever sport it is that you play, and it's like you're never going to want to do every drill.
Hmm.
You're never going to want to participate in every part of practice. But if I understand how things link together, that if I work this cone drill, I'm going to make my feet faster over time. And my feet being faster means my get off is a little bit faster, which
Right.
means I have a better potential to beat the man across from me. Well, now, okay, let's run the cone drill 1,000 times because this is where we're headed. What we're trying to build is a faster athlete. What we're trying to build is someone who can, run the bases that much faster, or get your feet right so you're batting the right way, or striking the ball in soccer, and so you hit it more efficiently, whatever it may be, whatever the thing is. This little drill that's annoying for you to do is connected to this bigger picture. It does help you give a lot more feedback. And I would say this, like, because it can be really tough, and I think too, like some schools, because I've been at places, when I was coaching at Capital, we were like turning a program around, right? Their football program at that point in time was pretty terrible. And uh, I mean, I'm trying to think. I think it was like rare for them to win more than 2 or 3 games in a
Which is
year.
tough. Yeah.
Um, and that really turned a corner with the incoming of particular coach, Coach Z. I don't remember his actual full name because I just called him Z all the time,
Sure.
but whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Um, he came in, and that's the guy who I was working under. And a lot of the reason why I think the culture shifted is because he did cast a very compelling vision. I didn't agree with exactly all of his methods, but it didn't really matter, right? Like,
Hmm.
I conformed to the methodology of the coach and the things that we needed to do because I understood where we were going. And so, when he implemented certain things, and I was like, I don't really want to do that, but it was like, well, but he is the coach and he's cast this compelling vision of where we're going to head. And so the only way to find out if it works is if we put in the work, right? So you were just, it's the only way you're going to figure it out. So you put in the work with the kids, and then, like you said, because you can think about feedback as almost like course correction, right?
Right.
So it's like, if
Right.
this is where we're headed, hey, your failure in this particular department is leading us away from what we're trying to accomplish. We need to course correct. We need to fix the technique. We need to fix the effort. We need to fix the mindset. We need to recalibrate you to like what you actually are, because people that come in with inflated egos and things like that, sometimes you do need to pop it a little bit and bring them back down to earth and
Oh
help
yeah.
them figure out what they can and can't do. Um, but I honestly think even that's really detrimental if you never help your athletes realize their limitations. That's not good, you
Right.
know. Um,
Yeah. It's really good.
like, that's okay, right? To help a kid understand that. But put it in context of then what recalibrate what success is. Like, success is not the NFL, right?
Right.
Success is not a college scholarship. Um, Success is being a great teammate. It's putting in your full effort every practice to help your teammates maximize their potential. It's being ready to go when your name is called and you go in the game to execute your responsibilities. It's bringing a great attitude, like, you know what I mean, like
Sure.
recalibrating what that is, because there are real limitations. Like I don't think it would have ever mattered how hard I practiced. I would never make it to the NBA, right?
Sure.
Like, it would never happen, no matter how much I believed in myself or how hard I worked at it. That just would never be a thing. I would never make it to the NFL. Like, it's just, that's my kids the other day. We're actually having this conversation. This is funny. We were having breakfast, and Judah, my 8-year-old, who's getting ready to play his first round of like tackle football, was asking
Yeah.
questions, and he goes, "Dad," why aren't you in the NFL? I was like, "Oh, well,
Thanks, man.
son, let me tell you why. As it
Yeah.
turns out, I'm not fast enough. I'm not strong enough. Um, I didn't have the talent or skill level to go beyond high school. And so that's just what it was. Like, and his mind was like blown. He was like, wait a minute, you're not strong enough? Because in his mind, I'm the strongest human being on the planet,
For
right? It just
sure. Yeah.
like blew his mind.
Right.
And I was like, no, bud, like, I'm not like, in his, and this is okay, right? He's 8 years old. So in his mind, he's going to be in the NFL someday. Very, very unlikely that that's going to be the case.
Sure.
You know, chase it though. Like go see what you got
Right.
at this age, right? Go chase and see what you got. But like there are limitations on that, right? Like it
Right.
just wouldn't matter. I remember at times my senior year being stuck playing on the line and thinking like, man, I wish I could just get an opportunity to play running back or receiver, or I even pitched to my coaches at one point, like, let me play tight end. So
Yeah.
I'll still block, but then I can go out and maybe catch ball and make plays and stuff. And they're like, well, this is what we really need you to do. So that's what I did. And the route is, no matter what I would have done, I wouldn't have made it. Cause like I remember a couple years later, um, I was playing in like an indoor flag football league, right?
Okay.
Um, it was a wild deal. Like the ball was live off the wall. So it was like an indoor soccer arena,
I've heard of this.
balls
Yeah.
live off the walls, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was pretty wild. But we get into this, and me and this group of guys, and we kind of tear up this like lower level league, did really, really well. Next season, guy goes, hey, you know what? We're gonna move up a league. Take on a little harder competition. Well, like the next step up was all these like Division 3 guys that had washed out, um, guys that were using it as some sort of like staying in shape in their off season kind of deal. And the speed level on the field at that point was like,
Yeah.
it blew my mind. And
Yeah.
these are guys that couldn't get a D1 contract. These are guys that will never make it to the league.
Right.
Um, and like it was like night and day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
It's wild.
can I do pretty well against a bunch of average Joe guys? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beer
Great.
guts, all that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sign
Yeah.
me up all day.
Sure.
Um, there's something different. So it's recognizing, and I guess my whole point in saying that was like you do have to be realistic at some point about what your potential is. And it always makes me think those like cringy moments on like what was it? America's Got Talent, or not America's Got Talent. What was
Like
that?
American Idol.
American Idol.
American Idol. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the one where people make it to the show, and like all I could ever think about when I would watch these would be like, has nobody ever told you like you can't sing?
So,
Nobody in your life loves you enough to be like, hey, you're terrible. Like,
right. You can't do
don't
this.
do this.
Right.
Stop. Like nobody cares about you in your life enough to do that.
It's a good
Because
point.
I do think that like if I love somebody, I'm going to be honest with them, and I'm going to say, hey, listen, like, hey, if you want it, you can put in this work. Let's calibrate your expectations. What do you think a real goal is for you? Right? Like,
Right.
how would you measure success at the end of the season, or at the end of this time frame? I don't want to be a dream killer. I don't want to be somebody who like snuffs out people's excitement about what they could and couldn't do. Um, but I almost think it's like, I don't know, like it's just unkind to not help someone realize, like, when you hit this place where it's like, I think we kind of know, you know, what
Right.
your athletic potential is. If we're not being honest about what real success is, or what their realization of potential is, I don't know that that's it's not loving, and it's not prioritizing the player over ego. And yeah, I guess that's
No, I'm with you, and I'm watching the time because I know we're getting close to the end of the time.
yeah,
Which this is sucks because I have a ton of thoughts and I could keep this going forever. We'll have to have you back on,
yeah.
man. Because I'm really
Fire away,
enjoying this
man.
conversation. But just your point, I think there's a difference between, because I agree with you. Um, that's a loving conversation that needs to happen. It can be an incredibly awkward conversation for sure,
For
because like
sure.
you
Yeah,
are it becomes very personal, right? Because
yeah,
it's going after someone's dream, something that they're incredibly passionate about and thinking about night and
yeah.
day. And so it is a difficult conversation, but I wouldn't even say it's a dream killer, because I think a dream killer would be the coach that says, hey, you can't do this. Don't try.
Right,
And then the conversation ends there. I think what you're saying, and it sounds like what you've probably done before with people. It's like, hey, this is probably not the road for you. Like, just take singing.
right,
Let's just be honest. The singing thing is not your lane. But, and there's like that but there, you reroute them into a different direction to keep the
right,
dream going, but maybe the dream looks a little bit different. For example, like with
right,
sports, we've had conversations with people who play D1 football or some D1 sport, and they get to the point where they say, okay, whether it's injury or whether it's just they realize that they've hit the ceiling of their skill, they're like, okay, they come to the realization, the end of the road where it's like, okay, I'm done. This is my whole life. I'm at the point where I'm done. And I'm not doing this anymore. And they have to kind of cope with that, right? They have to realize, okay, they have to accept it and say, okay, now I have to go in a different direction. That doesn't mean you have to be done with sports. You may have a dream to play in the NBA. Well, you're not tall enough. You don't have the athleticism, but can you still be connected to your sport? Can you still be connected to that sports world and the basketball world in some capacity? And you can still maybe you become, some kind of trainer. Maybe you become something else
Right.
where you're still connected to the sport. You're just not doing it in the same capacity that you were hoping to do
Right.
it. And I think if you have the ability and the willingness to kind of guide someone in that direction, so not just kill their dream and say you're done and leave it there, but actually reroute them and maybe spark their mind and their heart in a different way. I mean, that's like you said, it's a loving thing that you can do for someone.
Right.
And who knows, you may be the only person that is willing to do that in their life. As a
Yeah.
coach, you might be the one person that was willing to have that tough conversation when no one else would. They're like, yeah, you're amazing. You're you're
Right.
Beyonce. It's like, oh, I don't think so. Maybe
Yeah.
you're not hearing correctly, but like as a
Right.
coach, you may be the one person that can have that conversation. So, as uncomfortable as it may be, it's
Right.
worth having that conversation.
For sure. I would throw out a couple things real quick,
Please.
not knowing how much time we got, but you have daughters, right?
Yeah.
Have you read the book Strong Father, Strong Daughters?
No.
No. Okay, so it's written by a female. I believe she's a doctor. And what she talks about is how her father's strong boundaries in her life when she was a kid, she didn't realize it at the time, but he was protecting her from things,
Hmm.
actually set her up for better success in the future. And I've thought about that a lot in terms of like the coaching space of like, part of your job is to protect your players. Part of your job is to help them understand what those boundaries are. And a lot of times, what we don't understand as parents is that in the moment, not necessarily, but over time, what's translated by having boundaries and rules and expectations and that type of thing is care. Like, I care about you enough that I will set these parameters around what you can and can't do, sort of thing, right? Which
Right.
is a super good book. I would recommend it for anybody that has a girl. Um, to the other thing, oh my goodness, and my mind just kind of lost it. I don't remember where I was going with
The
what I
worst
was
feeling.
thinking. It's
I've
the
done a
worst
lot of
feeling.
podcast episodes. It's happened
A
so
lot of
much.
podcasts where you lose what was the other thought. The other thought, um, maybe you can cut this empty time
That's all
out
right. Well,
in the middle of it.
I mean,
Edit it.
we were talking
Yeah,
about like killing someone's dream or rerouting them into a different
yeah.
direction.
Oh, so that's what I was gonna say. Sometimes what you can do, boom, way to go, man.
Back on track. Thank you.
One of the things you can do is rather than making it like, hey, I don't think you're gonna be able to do this, you can start to make it some sort of like markers, like, hey, this is awesome. If you want to get a scholarship to go to the next level, here are some things that are going to have to be true. You're going to need to be able to do this. You're going to need to be able to do this, and this, right?
Yeah, that's
And
good.
just set these goal markers to say, and here's where you're at right now, and here's the gap between you and what you need to be able to do in order to get noticed at that level. Um, Here's the work that it's going to take to improve all those spaces. Are you ready to do it? And if they're ready to do it and put in the work, then hey, go for it, right? And who knows, maybe they surprise you, maybe they put in the work, maybe they improve in all those areas and they get to a place where they're hitting those markers. But I think that also gives people some opportunity to self-eliminate a little bit and
Yeah,
realize like, I'm probably not gonna drop my 40 time from 5.2 to 4.3. Like, that's probably
sure.
not in the cards right now, or
That's really
whatever it may
smart. Yeah, I
be.
like that. I like that a
So it
lot.
gives them some opportunity to self-eliminate. And the last thought that I had while you were talking was that was awesome. I don't know if you I don't know, but I'm a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan, right? So like,
I'm a
and
Green Bay Packers fan.
okay, well, good for you, right?
Hey, good for you,
Way to
man.
go.
You're in Wisconsin, so that's tough for
I
you.
am in Wisconsin. It's not that hard actually, because I
Is that
just look
that
at
bad?
people and I just do this and I just go, hey, you
Yeah.
guys don't have seven of those, do you? That's cool
We have a
though.
lot of trips to the NFC Championship, which
A lot of NFC
hurts
championship
me.
trips. That's good.
Every year is rough.
Hey, it's okay. It's okay. There, anyway, we're going down the line. but like I love Mike Tomlin as a coach and like
Yeah.
listening to some of the stuff that he says. And I don't know if did you catch he did like a long form interview with Ryan Clark and a couple other players. I
Oh,
don't
on the
remember what the
pivot.
name of their the pivot. Yeah, yeah. Did you watch that?
I didn't. I've heard some people talk about it. I haven't had a chance to listen yet, but I heard it was
Oh my
really
gosh.
good.
It was super good. But one of the things I think it was in that one of the things that he talked about was like he played college football at a small school, and he talked about how he came to this realization that like I'm not good enough to go to the next level. Like that's just not going to happen for
Right.
me. Like I can't operate at their level, and that's what inspired him to go into coaching, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the misnomers about coaching. I think sometimes is you think like you have to have done it on this level, and that's just not true. What you have to be able to do, I think, to be a good coach, one, you should be passionate about the sport or the thing that you're coaching.
Right.
Two, you do have to have knowledge about how it should be done,
Right.
right? Having a really clear mental image of like how this should be done to be done correctly.
Right.
Even if you can't execute it on the highest level, but this is what it looks like when it's done on the highest level. And then you have to love people enough to have those conversations and help them and teach them how to do it in that space, right? To give them the appropriate feedback, um, as hard as it may be, as many times as it takes, if the potential is there that they could do it at that level. And so, and like help them continually move to this better version of the outcome. And
Right.
I loved that, like listening to him talk about it because it's just so transparent. He's just like, yeah, like I couldn't do it. He's like,
Yeah.
what am I doing? He's like, and he's as a guy who's walking into, like he took over the Pittsburgh Steelers when we're at like Super Bowl level team. You
Right.
know, you got Troy Polamalu and James Harrison and James Ferrier and Ryan Clark and Heinz Ward and Heath Miller and Ben Roethlisberger. You know what I mean?
Right.
In like peak form, right?
Right.
Um, Antonio Brown when before he got hit in the head and went a little
Yeah. Went
uh
sideways a little bit. Yeah.
little sideways there,
Yeah.
but you know what I'm saying, like, and he can't do what they can do, and
Right.
and that's okay, but he has a really clear picture of how it should be done, so he can help them figure it out.
Right. Which I think is a great point because I mean, how many times, and I'm sure you've heard this over the years, that it's typically guys like that, and there's exceptions to the rule, but guys like that who could not do the skill at the highest level, but they could see the game at the highest level because their
Right.
vantage point and their perspective allowed them to learn in a different way. Where, I feel like if you Michael Jordan would probably be a tough coach, right? Because he
Oh
sees the
yeah.
game, plays the game. He played the game at a completely different level that
Right.
I don't think he could coach, and he would probably get
Mm-mm.
frustrated. But he hasn't had that vantage point, right? Because he's never had to have that vantage point
Right.
because he could just go out and do it and work harder than everybody else and just kill it. Mike Tomlin, not that case, but that gives him a vantage point that's super helpful for a coach and a
Yeah.
leader of men. Like I think that's a good thing. And again, like I love that because again, we're talking about like rerouting someone's passion. You can't tell me that Mike Tomlin's passion for football didn't translate to his coaching. It's obvious every Sunday. You know what I'm
Oh
saying?
my goodness. He did. I am dorky enough about my fanhood with the Pittsburgh Steelers that like I watch the daily practice reports from training camp and like the interviews and all that kind of stuff. Like I
Yeah,
want to know
sure.
what happened that day. I'm going to
100%.
check in and find out. Uh, Somebody interviewed him the other day, and they were asking him like, "Hey, coach, like, tell me about like what fuels his passion for football." He's like, "Listen, I've been a part of a football team since I was boiling my mouth guard, the night before in a pot on the stove as a little kid. Like I just love it. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing I want to do more. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Like I mean, he is lit up. So that passion translates into passionate players,
Yeah.
and it becomes part of like how do you can't cast a compelling vision about where you're headed as a coach or as a team, as an organization, absent of some kind of passion, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
nobody's dying on that hill. Nobody's like charging battle with you to go figure it out. Nobody's grinding out practices and doing the drill for the umpteenth time if there isn't this like underlying belief in how great this is,
Yeah.
how great the potential is that you could realize. And so that's one of the things that I love listening to him. But I'm definitely a Tomlin fanboy. I love all the random stuff that he says. He's fun to listen to in interviews and things like that.
Oh, 100%. And his
Yeah.
track record is,
So
speaks for itself too. No, he's
right.
incredible. I need to check out that podcast for sure. I did want to mention before we get out of here, I did want to mention one thing based on what you said too, talking about how giving your athletes the ability or the opportunity to self-evaluate. I think that's really important
Yeah.
because in any aspect of life, any role of leadership, you want to get to that point, right? Because the bottom line is Coach Manning is not going to be with these athletes when they're married, when they're
Hmm.
having conversations with their kids, when they're having conversations
Yeah.
with their boss and other coworkers. Like you're not going to be there. Coaches are not going to be there every step of the way. So the things that you're teaching is giving them the tools they'll need one day to do it on their own and think about it on their own. And so I like what you said about the
Right.
self-evaluation, because you could stand there and say, okay, here are the 5 things that you aren't strong enough in to go to the next level. You could say it like that and just make it very clear and just, spell it out for them. But you say, here are the 5 things. How do you feel about your ability in these areas? And you put it on them, and then it forces them to think about it, which they're going to have to do for the rest of
Right.
their life. And so I really like that. I think there's a lot of life value to that idea. So appreciate you
For
sharing that, man.
sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Absolutely.
Like I
Absolutely,
said,
man.
I'm looking at the clock. I could keep this going, but I'm not going to do that to you. You're Midwest or
Good.
Central time, so we'll get you out of here. But any closing remarks you want to make before we get out of here? Social media stuff. If you're interested in Connor's geez, it's Wednesday wisdom. Yeah, I would
Yeah. Yeah.
recommend it for sure. So give them a follow. But any other parting
Yeah.
words before you share your social media?
I know. I think it's awesome. Anybody who's actually taken time to listen and cultivate themselves by tuning into things like your podcast, tapping into other resources is awesome. Not because I'm brilliant or any one particular episode, but it's more that it speaks to the orientation around growth
Sure.
and taking personal responsibility for that growth, that somebody else isn't going to do it for you. So just even
Right.
tapping into the resource, and it's super cool that you take the time to do this
Thank you,
and
man. I
put
love
this
it.
kind of resource out there. So thanks for having me on, man. Uh,
Oh, thank
if
you.
you want to come check it out at P Conor Manning, that's it on Instagram. I don't really do Twitter. I think I have one, but I haven't opened it in a very, very long time. So that'd
I
be
do it.
lame.
You're not missing a whole
Uh,
lot. It's
yeah,
wild out there. Not as bad as
it
Reddit,
feels a
but
little repetitive. It feels a little repetitive between all the different things. So I just, primarily that is a great place to come hang out. So
perfect. I take that back. I do like Twitter for my sports news, like especially right now with
yeah.
training camp. I get a lot of my Packers. It's just like a whole feed
Ooh,
of Packers beat writers and trying to figure out
yeah.
who's our number one receiver. So that's all right. It's right now Alan
Hey, we're
Lazard.
trying to figure out who's going to throw the ball to
That's
receivers.
a good
So
point.
that's different problem. I think
Different
I'd rather
problem.
have yours than mine.
100%. Yeah,
Um,
I'm okay with 12.
yeah.
Leading the charge. But anyways, that could be a whole nother podcast. We don't need to get into
Uh,
that. So hey man,
all right, cool.
as always, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing some of your insight. And I'm not joking, man. I would love to have you back at some point
Yeah.
because I enjoyed
Yeah.
this
Would love it.
conversation. So good luck with everything. And we will talk to you guys next week. See ya.
All right.